"Get inside before it's too late," the rancher ordered. She stared at him, trembling. The wind came first, long before the rain. It moved across the wide ranch fields like a warning, bending the dry grass and carrying dust into the air. The rancher stood near the barn, checking the wooden doors as clouds gathered above him. He had lived on this land for many years, and he knew the signs of a bad storm. The sky turned heavy and dark in a way that felt different from an ordinary evening. He worked quickly, tying ropes, closing gates, and guiding the horses into shelter. The animals sensed the change too. They moved restlessly, ears twitching, eyes alert. Thunder rolled far away, low and slow, like a distant drum. The ranch was quiet most days. It sat far from town, surrounded by open land and long dirt roads that few people traveled unless they had a reason. The rancher liked it that way. Silence gave him space to think. It helped him forget things he did not want to remember. He was known in the nearby town as a hardworking man who spoke little but always kept his word. Some people thought he was cold, but he simply preferred peace over noise. After years of loss and disappointment, he had learned that being alone was easier than trusting too quickly. Another strong gust of wind hit the barn, making the wooden walls creak. He paused and looked toward the horizon. A thin line of lightning flashed across the sky, followed by louder thunder. The storm was coming faster than expected. He turned to walk back toward the house when something caught his eye near the fence line. At first, he thought it was a loose tarp or maybe a branch moving in the wind. But then he saw movement, slow, uncertain, and human. A figure stood near the broken section of fence at the edge of the ranch. He narrowed his eyes and stepped closer, shielding his face from the dust. It was a young woman. Her clothes were covered with dirt, and her hair moved wildly in the wind. She looked small against the wide open land, almost lost in the storm's shadow. She didn't seem to notice him at first. She stood still, arms wrapped around herself, staring at nothing. The rancher felt a moment of surprise. People did not appear here without warning. He walked toward her slowly, careful not to startle her. As he got closer, he saw that she was trembling. Her face was pale, and her eyes moved quickly, as if searching for danger. "Hey!" he called gently, raising his voice over the wind. She turned sharply, fear flashing across her face. For a moment, she looked ready to run. He stopped a few steps away, keeping distance so she would not feel cornered. "You all right?" he asked. She didn't answer. The wind grew stronger, pushing against both of them. Thunder cracked louder this time, much closer. He glanced toward the sky and then back at her. Whatever her story was, she should not be standing outside in a storm like this. "You need to get inside," he said calmly. "Storm's getting worse." She shook her head slightly, unsure. Her eyes studied him carefully, trying to decide whether he was safe. The rancher could see the hesitation clearly. It was not just fear of the weather, it was fear of him. Lightning flashed again, bright enough to make both of them blink. A loud crack followed immediately, and the wind whipped dust into their faces. He raised his voice, stronger this time but not harsh. "Get inside before it's too late." The words hung in the air between them. She stared at him, trembling. Something inside her was fighting against the idea of trusting a stranger. He could see it, the conflict, the fear, the doubt. He stepped back slightly, giving her more space. "Your choice," he added quietly, "but it's not safe out here." For a few seconds, neither of them moved. The storm grew louder, pushing her closer to a decision she did not want to make. Finally, she took a slow step forward, then another. He turned and began walking toward the house without looking back, giving her the chance to follow without pressure. After a moment, he heard her footsteps behind him, light and uncertain. The ranch house stood strong against the wind, its wooden walls weathered but solid. He opened the door and held it wide so she could enter first. She hesitated at the threshold, glancing inside as if expecting something hidden. "It's just a house," he said simply. She stepped inside. The warmth felt immediate compared to the cold wind outside. He closed the door firmly behind them, shutting out the storm's roar. For a moment, the only sound was her breathing. She stood near the entrance, still ready to leave if needed. He moved slowly, placing a kettle on the stove. "You can sit," he said, gesturing toward a chair. "No pressure." She remained standing but watched him carefully. Every movement he made seemed to matter to her, as if she was measuring his intentions. The rancher worked quietly, used to silence. He filled a mug with hot tea and placed it on the table near her, then stepped away so she would feel less watched. "You look like you've been walking a while," he said. She nodded slightly, still not speaking. Rain began hitting the roof, soft at first, then louder as the storm fully arrived. The house shook slightly with each strong gust of wind. After a few minutes, she slowly moved toward the table and picked up the mug. Her hands shook as she held it, but the warmth seemed to help. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She hesitated, then told him. He nodded once, accepting the answer without asking more questions. The silence between them was not uncomfortable. It felt careful, like two strangers standing at the edge of trust. Outside, something heavy slammed against the barn, making her jump. Fear filled her eyes instantly. "It's just the wind," he said calmly. "Everything's secured." She looked toward the window, then back at him, still unsure. The rancher sat down across the room, leaving space between them. He understood that trust did not come quickly, especially when someone carried invisible weight. Minutes passed. The storm grew louder. Thunder rolled across the sky and lightning flickered through the curtains. Slowly, her shoulders began to relax. The warmth of the room and the steady calm of the rancher created a feeling she had not expected: safety. But even as she sat there, holding the mug tightly, her eyes kept moving toward the door, as if part of her was still ready to run. The storm did not slow down after she came inside. Rain hit the roof in heavy waves, and the wind pushed against the walls as if trying to find a way in. The rancher moved quietly around the room, adding more wood to the fire and checking the windows. He did not rush her or ask too many questions. He understood that silence sometimes helped more than words. She sat at the table, holding the warm mug between her hands. The heat spread slowly through her fingers, easing some of the tension in her body. Every now and then, she looked toward him, studying the way he moved. He seemed calm, steady, and focused on small tasks that kept the house ready for the storm. After a while, he spoke again, his voice gentle. "You hungry?" She hesitated before answering. "A little." He nodded and walked to the kitchen area. He kept his movements slow and predictable so she would not feel nervous. Soon, the smell of simple food filled the room. He placed a bowl in front of her without making a big deal about it, then sat down across from her with his own meal. She watched him for a moment before beginning to eat. At first, she took small bites as if unsure whether she should relax. But slowly her hunger took over and she finished most of the food without realizing it. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You're welcome," he replied. Another loud crash came from outside. She froze, eyes wide, her breathing quickening. He stood up calmly. "Probably a loose board or something hitting the barn," he said. "Storm's strong tonight." Her eyes moved toward the door again, fear returning. "What if someone comes here?" she asked softly. The rancher paused for a moment before answering. "No one usually comes this way during weather like this," he said. "Roads get too rough." She nodded but did not look fully convinced. The power flickered suddenly and the lights dimmed before returning. She tightened her grip on the mug. He lit a lantern just in case and placed it on the table. The warm glow filled the room, making it feel calmer despite the storm outside. "You said you were walking," he said gently. "Your car nearby?" She looked down at the table. "A few miles back, it stopped working. That's a long walk in weather like this." She shrugged slightly as if she did not want to explain more. He did not push further. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and listened to the sound of the rain. He knew from experience that people shared their stories when they were ready, not when they were asked. Minutes passed, and the storm continued to rage. The fire cracked softly, creating a steady rhythm that slowly calmed the room. She looked around the house, noticing small details: old photographs on the wall, a worn hat hanging near the door, shelves filled with tools and books. Everything felt simple but cared for. "You live here alone?" she asked. "Yes." She waited, expecting him to add more, but he didn't. There was something in his quietness that made her feel safe rather than uncomfortable. Another flash of lightning filled the room with bright light for a moment. She flinched again, her body reacting before her mind could catch up. "You can stay here tonight," he said. "Guest rooms down the hall." She looked at him quickly, surprised by the offer. "No expectations," he added calmly. "Just shelter from the storm." She nodded slowly. "Thank you." They sat in silence again, but this time it felt softer. The tension that filled the room earlier began to ease. After some time, she spoke again, her voice hesitant. "You're not curious why I was out there?" He thought for a moment. "Everyone else got their reasons," he said. "You'll tell me if you want to." His answer seemed to surprise her. She looked at him carefully, as if testing whether he truly meant it. "I've been walking since morning," she said finally. "Didn't think the storm would come so fast." He nodded. Weather changes quick out here. She took a deep breath like she was deciding how much to reveal. I needed to leave somewhere. He did not interrupt. She continued slowly, choosing her words carefully. Things were not right. I felt trapped. The rancher listened quietly, giving her space to speak without pressure. I thought if I just left quietly, everything would be easier, she said, but nothing feels easy. Her hands trembled slightly again. You're safe here, he said gently, at least for tonight. She looked at him, searching his face for signs of doubt or judgment. She found none. Outside, the wind howled louder, and something heavy struck the side of the barn again. This time, she stood up quickly, panic rising. I should go, she said suddenly, as if fear pushed her toward leaving. He raised his hand slightly, not to stop her, but to calm her. Storm S at its worst right now, he said. Leaving would be more dangerous. She stood still, breathing fast. He grabbed his coat and a flashlight. I'll check outside, he said, just to make sure everything's fine. Her eyes widened. Don't go. I'll be quick, he said. Lock the door behind me. He stepped outside into the storm. The wind pushed against him immediately, rain soaking his clothes. He walked toward the barn, shining the flashlight around. A loose metal sheet had fallen against the wall, banging with each gust of wind. He secured it quickly, working with steady hands despite the weather. The ranch had survived many storms before, and he knew how to handle them. When he returned to the house, he knocked gently. She opened the door almost instantly, relief visible on her face. All good, he said, shaking water from his coat. She stepped aside, letting him enter. For a moment, she looked like she wanted to say something but held back. The storm continued through the night, but inside the house, the atmosphere changed. She sat closer to the fire now, her posture less defensive. Why help me? She asked suddenly. He thought for a moment. Because someone should. The simple answer seemed to affect her more than long explanations would have. Hours passed. They spoke about small things, the ranch, the animals, the quiet life he chose. Slowly, she began to relax, though traces of fear still lingered in her eyes. As the night grew deeper, she realized something important. For the first time in a long while, she felt safe enough to rest. But even as the fire burned low and the storm continued outside, a part of her remained alert, as if expecting something to change at any moment. And the rancher sensed that whatever she had left behind was not finished with her yet. Morning came slowly after the long storm. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still gray and heavy. The ranch felt quiet again, almost as if nothing had happened. Water dripped from the roof, and the ground outside looked dark and soft. She woke up in the guest room, confused for a moment about where she was. Then she remembered the storm, the wind, and the rancher's voice telling her to get inside. She sat up slowly, listening. The house was peaceful, no loud wind, no crashing sounds, just stillness. For the first time in many days, she had slept through the night. She walked down the hallway carefully. The smell of coffee filled the air. The rancher stood near the stove, already dressed for the day, calm as always. Morning, he said without turning around. Morning, she replied softly. He placed a plate on the table. Roads will need time to dry, he said, but we can check your car later today. She nodded and sat down. Her hands were no longer shaking the way they had the night before, but something heavy still rested in her eyes. They ate quietly. The rancher did not rush her, and he did not stare. He seemed to understand that she was thinking about something important. After breakfast, he stepped outside to inspect the damage from the storm. She followed him slowly onto the porch. The land stretched wide and open in front of them. Everything looked washed clean. The air felt fresh, but she did not feel light inside. He walked toward the barn, checking fences and moving fallen branches. She watched him for a while before finally speaking. I didn't tell you everything, she said. He stopped working but did not look surprised. He leaned against the fence and waited. She stepped off the porch and walked closer, her boots sinking slightly into the soft ground. My car didn't just break down, she said quietly. I left in a hurry. He nodded once, letting her continue. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving, she said. I just packed what I could and drove away. The wind moved gently across the fields, much calmer than the night before. I've been planning it for months, she continued. But when the moment came, I felt scared. Leaving is never easy, he said. She looked down at the ground. It wasn't just fear of leaving, it was fear of being found. Those words stayed in the air. He straightened slightly but kept his voice calm. You think someone's looking for you? She swallowed. I don't know. Maybe he doesn't like losing control. The rancher did not react with anger or shock. He simply listened. "I thought if I drove far enough I could start over," she said. "But when the car stopped working, I felt like the world was telling me I couldn't escape." He shook his head gently. "Sometimes the world just throws obstacles, doesn't mean you're meant to turn back." She looked at him, surprised by the steady confidence in his voice. "He always said I wouldn't survive on my own," she whispered, "that I needed him." The rancher walked toward the barn door and closed it firmly, as if sealing something away. "You made it this far," he said. "That says something." She let out a shaky breath, her eyes filled with emotion she had been holding in for too long. "I don't want to go back," she said. "You don't have to," he replied. It was the first time someone had said that to her without pressure. They worked side by side for a while, repairing small storm damage. He handed her tools and she followed his instructions. The simple tasks helped calm her thoughts. Around midday, they prepared to drive toward where her car had stopped. The rancher grabbed his truck keys. "You ready?" he asked. She hesitated for only a second, then nodded. The dirt road was still muddy and the truck moved slowly. She stared out the window, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. When they reached her car, it sat alone near the side of the road, just as she had left it. The sight made her chest tighten. He stepped out and checked under the hood. After a few minutes, he called her over. "Battery connection's loose," he said. "Nothing serious," she blinked. "That's it. That's it." He tightened the connection carefully and then asked her to try starting it. The engine turned over and came to life. She felt a strange mix of relief and fear. Her car was working. She was no longer stranded, but now she had to decide what came next. As they stood near the road, a distant sound caught her attention. Another vehicle far behind them, moving slowly along the same dirt path. Her heart started beating faster. "Do you see that?" she asked quietly. The rancher turned and looked. A truck was approaching in the distance. "Could be anyone," he said calmly, but she knew the shape of that truck. She had seen it too many times before. Her breathing became uneven. "It's him." The rancher looked at her carefully. "You sure?" She nodded, her face pale again. The truck continued moving closer. "Get in my truck," the rancher said evenly. "No rushing." She moved quickly but tried not to panic. He closed the hood of her car and walked beside her toward his vehicle. The approaching truck slowed down as it neared them. It stopped a short distance away. A man stepped out. He looked frustrated but not surprised. She felt frozen. The rancher stepped slightly forward, not aggressive, just present. The man called out her name. She did not answer. He walked a few steps closer but kept distance. "You think you can just disappear?" he said loudly. The rancher's voice stayed steady. "She's free to decide where she wants to be." The man glanced at him, annoyed. "This doesn't concern you." The rancher did not move. "It concerns anyone standing on my land." Silence fell between them. She stood behind the rancher, her hands shaking again. But something inside her was changing. For the first time, someone was not speaking over her. Someone was not telling her what she should do. The man softened his tone slightly. "Let's just go home," he said to her. "You're making things harder than they need to be." She felt the old pressure rising, the familiar voice that used to control her choices. But the storm from the night before had changed something in her. She stepped out from behind the rancher. "I'm not coming back," she said, her voice quiet but clear. The man stared at her, shocked. "You don't mean that," he said. "I do." The wind moved gently between them, no longer violent like before. The rancher did not speak. He did not need to. This was her moment. The man looked frustrated, then disappointed. After a long pause, he turned back toward his truck. "This isn't over," he muttered before driving away. They watched until the truck disappeared down the road. Her knees felt weak and she had to steady herself against the rancher's truck. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded slowly, though tears filled her eyes. "I've never said no before," she whispered. He gave a small nod. "You just did." The weight she had carried for years did not disappear in that moment, but it felt lighter. They drove back to the ranch in silence, but it was a different kind of silence now. Not fear, not uncertainty. It was the quiet after a turning point, the kind that changes everything. The drive back to the ranch felt longer than before, even though the road was the same. She sat quietly in the passenger seat, watching the land pass by through the window. The sky had started to clear, and sunlight broke through the clouds in soft lines. The world looked calm again, but her thoughts were still moving fast. The rancher drove without speaking much. He did not fill the silence with questions. He understood that she needed time to process what had just happened. Saying no had taken more strength than she had expected. Even now, she could feel her hands shaking slightly. When they reached the ranch, he parked the truck near the house and stepped out first. She followed slowly, feeling both tired and relieved at the same time. The ranch looked different now. The same fences, the same barn, the same wide open land, but something inside her had changed. Yesterday she had arrived here scared and unsure. Today she stood there knowing she had made a choice for herself. "You should rest," he said gently. "That was a lot to handle." She nodded but didn't move toward the house right away. Instead, she stood on the porch and looked out at the fields. "What if he comes back?" she asked quietly. The rancher leaned against the railing beside her. "Maybe he will," he said honestly. "But that doesn't mean you have to change your decision." She looked at him, searching his face. He was calm, not worried, not angry, just steady. "I'm not used to people supporting me," she admitted. He gave a small smile. "Everyone deserves support." They went inside, and he made coffee while she sat at the table. The house felt warmer now, more familiar. The tension from the night before had softened into something quieter. As the afternoon passed, they worked together again. She helped repair a section of fence that had broken during the storm. He showed her how to hold the tools, how to pull the wire tight. The work was simple but satisfying. Every small task felt like a step toward stability. "You learn fast," he said. "I like doing things that make sense," she replied. "Out here everything feels honest." He nodded. "That's why I stayed." She looked at him curiously. "You could have left." He paused for a moment before answering. "I could have, but I chose to stay." She sensed there was more to his story, but she didn't ask. They both understood the value of sharing only when ready. Later, they sat outside near the barn as the sun began to set. The sky turned orange and gold, spreading warm light across the land. The calm after the storm felt almost unreal. She wrapped her arms around herself, not from cold, but from emotion. "I keep thinking about what happened," she said. "Part of me feels strong, another part feels scared." "That's normal," he said. "Change feels both ways at the same time." She nodded slowly. "I thought saying no would make everything clear," she continued. "But now I don't know what comes next." "You don't need to know everything right away," he replied. "Sometimes the next step is just staying still long enough to breathe." His words settled into her thoughts. She realized she had spent so long reacting to others that she had forgotten how to simply exist without pressure. Days passed slowly at the ranch. The rhythm of life there was steady, feeding animals in the morning, fixing small things during the day, quiet evenings watching the sunset. The routine helped her feel grounded. She laughed for the first time while helping him chase a stubborn goat back into its pen. The sound surprised her. It had been a long time since laughter felt natural. One afternoon, while cleaning the kitchen, she paused near the window. A car passed far down the road, barely visible. Her heart jumped for a second before she realized it was not the same truck from before. She took a deep breath. The rancher noticed her tension but did not comment directly. Instead, he asked if she wanted to help check the far fence line. She agreed, grateful for the distraction. As they walked, he told her small stories about the ranch, how he had built some of the fences himself, how certain trees had survived many storms. His voice carried quiet pride. "You built all this alone?" she asked. "Not always alone," he said carefully, "but life changes." She understood that answer. Life changed for everyone. That evening they sat on the porch again. The sky was clear, filled with stars. "I used to think strength meant staying," she said. "Staying quiet, staying patient, staying where I was told." "And now?" he asked. "Now I think strength means choosing," she said softly. He nodded. "That sounds right." A gentle breeze moved across the land. She felt calm in a way she had not felt for years. The next morning she made breakfast before he woke up. It felt natural, not forced. When he walked into the kitchen and saw the table set, he raised his eyebrows slightly. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I wanted to," she replied. They ate together, talking more easily now. The distance between them had changed into quiet friendship built on trust. Later that day, they heard a vehicle approaching. Both of them looked toward the road. Her body tensed again, but this time she did not feel frozen. A small delivery truck stopped near the gate. The driver handed the rancher a package and waved before leaving. She let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. "You handled that better," he said gently. "I'm learning," she replied with a small smile. As the sun began to set again, she stood near the fence and looked out at the horizon. She realized that the fear that once controlled her was slowly losing its power. The rancher joined her quietly. "I don't know how long I should stay," she said. "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not a burden," he said simply. "Stay until you know your next step." She nodded. The idea of having time, real time without pressure, felt new and comforting. That night, as she sat alone in the guest room, she reflected on everything that had happened since the storm. She had arrived trembling, unsure of everything. Now she felt stronger, clearer, more connected to herself. The future was still uncertain. The man from before might try again. New challenges would come, but she no longer felt powerless. Outside, the ranch rested under a quiet sky. The days after that became calmer, but they were not empty. Each morning brought small tasks, simple routines, and quiet conversations that slowly built something steady between them. She no longer woke up with fear in her chest. Instead, she woke up listening to the sounds of the ranch, birds outside the window, boots moving across the wooden floor, the soft hum of coffee brewing in the kitchen. One morning, she stepped outside before sunrise. The sky was painted in soft pink and orange. The air felt cool and fresh. She stood near the fence and watched the horses move slowly across the field. For the first time in years, her thoughts were not racing. The rancher joined her carrying 2 mugs. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "I slept," she said. "I just wanted to see this." He handed her a mug and followed her gaze toward the horizon. "It's different every day," he said. "That's what I like about it." She nodded. "It feels honest." He looked at her for a moment but said nothing more. Silence between them no longer felt heavy. It felt comfortable. Later that day, she made a decision she had been thinking about for a while. "I need to go into town," she told him. He paused, studying her expression. "Everything okay?" "Yes," she said. "I want to look for work. I can't stay here forever without building something of my own." He gave a small nod, proud but not surprised. "That sounds like a good plan." They drove into town together. The road felt different now. The same path that once carried fear now felt like a road forward. She looked at the small shops and buildings with new eyes, not as someone running away, but as someone arriving. They stopped near a small store that had a help wanted sign in the window. She stepped inside alone this time. The rancher waited outside, giving her space. When she came out 20 minutes later, her expression had changed. "They need someone part-time," she said, a small smile forming. "I start next week." "That's good," he replied simply. It was more than good. It was a beginning. Over the next few days, she began preparing for this new step. She organized her things, made small plans, and thought about renting a small room in town once she saved enough money. One evening, as they sat on the porch, she spoke quietly. "I don't want to depend on you," she said. He nodded. "You're not depending, you're rebuilding." She looked down at her hands. "You gave me space to choose, I won't forget that." He leaned back in his chair. "You chose on your own, I just stood nearby." She smiled softly. There was no rush between them, no pressure to define what they were to each other. What existed was respect, and sometimes respect meant more than anything else. Her first day at the store came quickly. She felt nervous that morning, adjusting her clothes and checking her reflection more than once. "You'll do fine," he told her before they left. "I hope so," she said. "You already faced harder things." His words stayed with her throughout the day. Work was simple but steady. She greeted customers, organized shelves, and learned the rhythm of the place. Each small task gave her confidence. She was capable. She was stronger than she had believed. When she returned to the ranch that evening, tired but proud, she found him repairing a section of fence. "How was it?" he asked. "I didn't run," she said with a small laugh. "I stayed," he smiled. "That's progress." Weeks passed. Her shifts at the store increased. She began saving money and looking at small rental spaces in town. The ranch remained a safe place, but now it felt like a chapter instead of a hiding place. One afternoon, she received a message on her phone. For a moment, fear returned. But when she looked at it, she realized it was only a service reminder from her car company. She let out a quiet breath. She noticed how different her reaction was now. Fear no longer controlled her actions. It appeared and then faded. That evening, she told the rancher she had found a small apartment above the store. "It's nothing special," she said, "but it's mine." He nodded, proud but calm. "When are you moving?" "In a few days." They sat quietly after that, both aware that something was shifting. On her last evening at the ranch, they stood together watching the sunset. The sky looked much like it had the first night after the storm, but she felt like a different person. "I was trembling when I first got here," she said. I remember, he replied. I thought your words were a command, she said softly. I didn't realize they were protection. He looked out at the horizon. Sometimes protection sounds loud, she smiled. You gave me more than shelter, she said. You gave me time. He turned toward her slightly. Time is what most people need. She felt emotion rise in her chest, but it was not sadness. It was gratitude. The next morning, she packed her small bag and loaded it into her car. The rancher helped without saying much. When everything was ready, she stood near the driver's door. You'll visit, he asked casually. If you'll let me, she replied. He gave a small nod. Gates always open. She paused, then stepped forward and hugged him briefly. It was simple, not dramatic, but full of meaning. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For telling me to get inside. He gave a soft smile. You walked in on your own. She got into her car and started the engine. This time there was no fear. The road ahead felt wide and full of possibility. As she drove away, she looked once in the rearview mirror. The ranch stood strong under the clear sky. It had been her shelter during the storm, but it was never meant to be her hiding place. In town, she unlocked the door to her small apartment and stepped inside. The room was empty except for sunlight coming through the window. She placed her bag down and stood still for a moment. No one was telling her where to go. No one was making her choices. The silence felt peaceful. That evening, she walked to the store for her shift. People greeted her by name. She felt part of something, not trapped by it. Back at the ranch, the rancher stood on his porch as the sun set again. The land was quiet. He did not feel lonely. He felt satisfied. He had not rescued her. He had not fought for her. He had simply given her space to stand on her own.